Hello everyone and welcome to the round 3 recap of the Candidates 2022. It's an 8-player tournament and the winner is going to be selected to fight against Magnus Carlsen, the world champion, for the world championship title. And it's the round number 3. So let's quickly check it out what happened in the game. First we are going to look at the game between Ding Liren versus Richard Rapper. So let's check it out. So Ding with the white pieces starts out the game with 1d4, and soon we have the Grunfeld defense on the board. Not going for the King's Indian defense because it's a very complicated and aggressive setup. But Grunfeld, which is very positional and very logical from the black side. We have takes, e4, takes, bishop to g7, bishop to c4. After bishop g7, there are many ways to continue the position from the white side. White can either go for playing knight f3, perhaps going to a4 check is now becoming more and more popular. Bishop c4, which was played in the game, and also bishop e3 is the move. So you see, there are already many moves for white to continue the position. But we have bishop to c4 from the white side by Ding. c5, very logical and very normal. Knight to e2. And remember guys, the reason white put the knight to e2 at the place of f3 is, whenever white tries to play knight f3, black tries to put the bishop on g4 and capture the knight on f3 in the future, which loses some defense from the d4 square. But when white puts the knight to e2, now bishop g4 is no longer possible because of f3, and now the knight and the queen is protecting the pawn on d4. So it's a very logical and very good setup for white. So we have knight to c6 by black, putting more pressure on the pawn on d4. Bishop to e3, castle, b6. So black wants to develop the bishop like this. Rook to c1, bishop b7, bishop to b5, going for the knight on c6. Rook c8, queen e2, cd. And now white is having a very nice setup, But okay, black is going to go for attacking that the center pawns to gain some advantage. And we have queen to d6. Rook d1, queen to b4, asking for a queen trade. White plays queen to d3, denying the queen trade. Definitely, if you try to trade the queen, it's a fine position. But you see, Ding wants to keep the queens on the board because it's a very pleasant position for white. e6, h4, and here we have rook to d8 by black. I think after h4, black should have gone for playing h5, so that h5 from the white side would not be possible in the future. And it's definitely a fine move from the black side. But when black played rook to d8, here white played bishop to g5, and here we have knight into d4. So now the game is going to just burn up. So now the game is starting to become complicated. Here black captured the pawn on the center. The rook is hanging, but white piece is also hanging. So let's see what happened. We have bishop into d8, and we have rook into d8. And now many of you are thinking, perhaps can black go for capturing the bishop on b5? If you try to go for capturing the bishop, now it's winning for white actually because of we here have queen in b5, knight b5, rook into rook, bishop into, and here we have a4 from the white side, hitting the knight. And guess what? Knight is having the only square to survive. Okay, not the only square. He's also having the c3 and the a3. But it doesn't matter. If you try to play the knight c3, I can simply play bc3, and here I'm having rook to c1, hitting both the bishops. So it's already winning for white. That is the reason rook into d8 was one of the only moves to survive in the game. And here white is already slightly better because you can say white is having a rook for a bishop and a pawn. And here we have h5 from the white side. Bishop to e5, a4, king to g7 from black. And king g7 was is considered as a blunder because here I would play the first of all king g7. Black could have simply continued the game by playing knight into e2, queen e2, rook d1, king g7, and it's a completely fine position. Although white is having some edge because it's a bishop and pawn versus rook, but definitely a playable position because black is having the bishop pair. But after king g7, white actually find the best move in the position, which is actually not an easy move to find. Can you find it? Okay, so if you are able to find this king f1, fantastic move. The reason is quite simple. After playing king f1, knight into e2 doesn't come up with a check. That's the main idea. And now, perhaps white can now play something like queen e3 and try to putting more pressure on the knight to d4. And here actually I can play simply rook to c4, hitting the queen and the knight, and on the next move I'm capturing the knight and it's winning. So black captured the knight on e2. And here, white can simply go for capturing the rook on d8, and we simply have the rook for the knight. And we are simply better. Although there are many complications which I'm going to show you, but what happened in the game was Ding simply captured the knight on e2, which makes the position equal, or you can still slide better for white. I think the reason Ding didn't went for the move queen into d8. Here we have queen into e4. White simply captures the knight, bishop into e2, and now what we have? Bishop, 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 rook. So first of all, we have an exchanger and a whole rook up. Black can continue with queen g2 check. King here, check, king move, bishop check. So here, in the worst scenario, black can actually get an exchange. But here we have queen e4. And that's already becoming very tricky for white. Because bishop pair is there. It's an open position. The king is completely open, but actually the pieces are near the king. So you can say white is somehow surviving. Like bishop to c4, because the bishop was attacked. Bishop takes, rook takes, check, queen comes, queen into h5, and what is happening in this position is black is having 4 pawns for a rook. But as we know that the pawns are very behind, in the 7th and the 6th rank, so it takes them a lot of time to make into a new queen. So till then, white can simply coordinate with the rook and the queen and the bishop to checkmate the black king, and it's a very pleasant position for white, and it's actually winning. But definitely very complicated position. So we have queen into e2, rook d1, a6, bishop a6, bishop a6, queen a6, queen e4, rook e1. I think at the place of rook e1, queen to e2 would have been slide much better, because just keeping the pieces near the king, so that black first of all will not get any opportunity to repeat the position, and second we are an exchanger. Enjoy it. But we have rook to e1, queen to d4, queen e2, bishop to f6, and it's actually pretty cement position for black. There are no actually serious weakness. So we have takes, queen e4, queen d2, rook e2 check, and here g3. And here after a couple of moves, we can say here first of all you cannot capture because it's a one move mate. So I think Ding didn't know how to play chess, so he didn't got checkmated. Queen g4, e5, and now the bishop is completely cement. There are no weakness. So we have rook d4, because this could have been something very dangerous for white. That is the reason he gave up an exchange, and Ding decided to repeat the position, and it's a draw on the move number 40. That's it. The game between Ding versus Richard, and now it's time to move to the game of Caruana Fabiano versus Jean-Christophe Duda. So in the game between Caruana Fabiano versus Duda, Caruana is playing with the white pieces, and he starts out the game with 1e4, c5, and we have the Sicilian. a6, and we have the knight of variation. f3, e5, knight b3, bishop to e6, bishop e3, and here we have h5 from the black side. A very common theory actually, I would say, in the Sicilian. If you play Sicilian, or if you play this particular opening from the white side against Sicilian, you definitely know. Knight d7, long castle, bishop e7, king b1, b5, knight to d5, bd5, ed5, and here we have knight to b6. So black is hitting the pawn on d5. So the only way to protect the pawn is to capture the knight with the bishop. Queen b6, knight a5, stopping this a5 ideas. Rook to c8, knight to c6, and here we have knight into d5. The idea here is, if white captures the black knight, we have queen into c6, and black is a pawn up. So here we have knight into e7 by white. You can't capture the knight with the king because you lose the knight. So you have to capture with the knight. We have queen d6, rook d6, and now it's an equal position. Equal material, equal position, nothing is happening. Knight to c6, rook d2, king e7, bishop to d3, rook to d8, rook d1, g6, f3, perhaps making a square for the bishop, and also taking away the b4 and the d4 square from this knight. Knight to a5, rook e2, hitting the pawn on e5, king f6, h4, knight b7, rook d2, knight comes, bishop comes, takes, king moves, and here we have c4 by white. If you take, I'm having bishop takes, and perhaps white can start to create some counterplay, I suppose. So here black decides to push the pawn. King c2, a5, b3, cementing or just blocking everything on the queen side. And now black is playing knight to b7. g3, white is preparing to play bishop to h3 check, hitting the king and the rook. Rook to d8. We have a rook trade. King to d3. Knight to b7. King e3. Knight c5. Pawn push, takes, push. Yeah. White is giving up a pawn. This is not we used to see every day. It looks like if it were me, I would have protected the pawn, but this guy is simply giving up the pawn. Takes, and the idea of giving up this pawn is king is coming on time to capture the b4 pawn. And I can't really protect this pawn. If you try to play knight f6, trying to defend it, I can play f5. I can't play this move because knight c7 is winning for black. You can't capture knight d5 check and you lose this pawn. So you must play f5. And if it takes, we can play bishop e2 and capture this pawn. And if it's the best move, if you try to play king c6, trying to stop this move, I can play fg6, and I'm having bishop to d3. And it's now white who's trying to create some counterplay, and white is actually better. That is the reason after f5 you must take, and the best line is to play bishop e2, knight c7, bishop h5, knight to d5, and we can, after bishop f7, we can play knight to c3. And if we try to take knight into a2, bishop into a2, and after king e5, black is on time to capture the pawn, or white, yeah, it's a draw actually. If you try to play h5, king f6, h6, king c6, h7, takes, and yeah, white bishop is going to capture the black pawn, and it's a draw. So we have knight to e6, f5 still, gf5, bishop e2, knight to c4, now knight f4, bishop f3, knight to g6, bishop h5, takes, everything got exchanged, and in the hand, and in the end we have this pawn against the knight, which ended in a draw. But actually I think the interesting part actually started in the endgame, I believe, when Fabiano decided to capture this pawn, because there is actually no move, because black is trying to capture. So after takes, he decides to play c5, which was actually a very phenomenal move, I would say. I would consider that as a brilliancy. Takes, and you see the pawns are on the dark square, but actually black received in no time, and it's a draw. A fantastic save, I would say, from the Caruana side, because I think in the end game, because knight against the bishop, I love the knight. Just tell me in the comment box below, which piece in the end game do you like? Do you prefer the knight or do you prefer the bishop? So this was the game between Caruana Fabiano versus Jan Christoph Duda of the third round, and now let's go into the game between Team Rajabov versus Nepo. So Team Rajabov playing with the white pieces starts out the game with 1d4 and Nepo with the black pieces replies with knight f6. c4, e6, knight f3, d5, g3, and we have the Catalan opening on the board. Very pleasant position. It's the only opening I would say from the white side that gives white the slightest edge in the position, we can say. We have dc4, bishop g2, c5 by Nepo. You must not capture because after queen takes, king takes, knight g4, and we can we can say that black is better. That is the reason we have castle from the white side, knight to c6, dc5, queen d1, rook d1, bishop to c5, and it's a fine position, I would say. Knight to d2 hitting this pawn, and for now the black is a pawn up. You can't really play b5 trying to protect the c4 pawn because of knight to e5. And it's a double attack on the knight. You must take the knight or else there's another no move. And after bishop into a8, white is simply an exchanger. So we have c3 by black, and black is saying after bc3, you see your pawn on a2 and c3 are isolated, and I'm better because I'm having the pawn on a7 and the b7. So you wanted the pawn back. I gave you the pawn, but I destroyed your pawn structure. So we have castle, knight b3, bishop e7, knight to d4, bishop to d7, knight c6, bc6, bishop c6, bc6, and now white is saying, what happened to your pawn structure? Now your pawn structure is as bad as mine. So we can conclude this position as an equal position. So we have bishop to e3, knight g5, the most ideal square for the knight, bishop to g4, the most ideal square for the bishop, c5. Black is saying I'm giving up the pawn on c5. Knight c5. If you try to capture this pawn with the bishop, I'm having bc5, knight c5, knight c3, and it's still an equal position. But okay, after knight c3, rook to g2 trying to defend the pawn. Rook, yeah, it's an equal position. Yeah. So we have knight c5, bishop c5, bishop c5, rook to c8. If you try to go for capturing this pawn. Now white is the one who is better because after bishop into f8, knight d1, bishop b4. Knight is somehow trapped. Knight is having the b2 square, but after rook c1, knight f4, it takes black a lot of time to just went back with the knight, and white actually receives a great counterplay and activity. That is the reason we simply have rook to c8. Hitting the bishop and the pawn, bishop moves, knight c3, bishop c3, rook c3, and everything is traded, and it's a rook end game, which everyone say the rook end games are 90% draw. And it's an equal position, both the players are grandmaster, so I think they are able to take a draw. We have a couple of moves played from the white side, king g7, rook to c7, attacking the pawn on f7, rook f8, rook to d6. White is preparing to capture the e6 pawn because the pawn cannot capture because the pawn is pinned. So we have rook to e8. Perhaps king f6 or king f6 was also fine. Rook to e8 protecting this pawn, rook to d7, and here we have a repetition, and we can say that the game is draw. Nothing special, but yeah, the opening was special, I would say, the Catalan. But yeah, Nepo actually played very well. I would say it's actually a very theoretical game. Everything was traded, and we can say the position is draw. So now let's move to the final game of the round 3, which was between Alireza versus Hikaru Nakamura, and the game is going to be simply phenomenal. So let's check it out. Alireza with the white pieces starts out the game with 1d4, and Nakamura replies with knight f6, c4, e6, knight to c3, and Alireza actually allowed Nakamura to go into the Nimzo Indian. You can't go into the Nimzo Indian if I try to play knight f3, because after bishop to b4, I can play knight to d2, bishop d2, and not playing knight to c3. That was the reason. Knight c3, bishop b4, allowing Nakamura going into this Nimzo engine variation. Short castle a3 bc3, queen c3 d5, bg5, and here Nakamura decides to capture on c4. There are many games where black continues the game with c5, putting the knight behind the pawn, like knight to c6, and it's fine position. If you try to capture the c5 pawn, I'm having this d4 move. You try to move the queen, I play knight to d7, hit this pawn, and perhaps white can go for pushing this pawn, b3, and yeah, it's a fine position. Not pushing this pawn, but knight f3, and the game can be continued. But Nakamura went for capturing the pawn on c4, making just solidifying the position. And after queen c4, we simply have b6, and it's such a comfortable position for black. Black can develop the bishop from to b7 or a6, hitting this queen or putting some pressure on this diagonal. Black can play d5 anytime black wants. Black can play queen c7, rook g8. Everything is going so perfectly for black. b6, we have rook g1 from the white side. If we try to play rook c1, trying to put pressure on the pawn on c7, black can place h6, bishop f6, queen f6. And if you try to capture my c7 pawn, I can go for capturing your center pawn, which is worth more than the pawn on c7. So definitely you try to protect the pawn, and now black can play simply c5. And now you see black is already prepared to capture the pawn. If you try to capture queen b2, and guess what? Black is the one who is slightly better in the position. If you try to capture, I can play a b6, putting more pressure on the pawn on a3. If you try to push the pawn, I can play bishop a6, hitting the queen and the bishop, perhaps also hitting the rook, and it's very comfortable position from black. So this is whole scenario. That was the reason Alireza decides to play rook to g1, bishop a6, queen a4, h6, bishop h4, queen e7. Nakamura wants to put the rook to g8, queen to e7, and yeah, it's a very comfortable position for black, I would say. The queen can't really move from this diagonal because bishop into f6 would come in every position. That is the reason queen e7 and rook d8, and it's very comfortable for black. It's unequal. Knight f3, rook to d8, queen c2, c5. And here's my first question. What will you play from the white side if you are in the Alireza Firouzja's shoes? Feel free to pause the video and try to find the move. Try to find the move from by which you are going to continue this position. The position is going to start becoming very complicated. So how are you going to continue the position? Okay, so definitely there are already many ways to continue the position. The most natural move which comes to everyone's mind is to play e3. And the idea is quite simple. If you try to trade the bishops, I can capture the bishop with the king, and in the future I can capture this knight. I can play g3, king g2, rook g1, and it's so equal. White is perfect. Nothing is happening. It's a very solid position, and we see a solid game. There is also one move which comes to everyone's mind: dc5, rook g1, queen d1, queen c5, and here actually if you try to give me a check, king h7, bishop f6, gf6, you can't capture. It's a mate. So you must play queen d2, and actually the best move is to play king d2. The best move is to play king d2 and king g7, and it's an equal position. Black is slightly better although. But the most natural move looks to play queen d2, and after queen f5, queen b1 is coming up, and black is the one. After knight c6, rook e8, black is the one who is actually slightly better. This is the whole scenario. But Alireza decided to go for a different approach, e4, making the position more complicated and saying to black, I'm going to play e5 on the next move. Hitting the knight, you can't move the knight because your queen is hanging. So Nakamura played bishop into f1 first, rook f1. Second surprise, he's not capturing the bishop with the king to play something like g3, king g2 in the future. He's capturing with rook He's saying to black, I'm going to keep my king in the center, going for e5, hitting the knight. What are you going to do? Nakamura plays g5. We have a piece sacrificed by Alireza. And guess what? It's a tournament where the players get 2 hours each on their clocks for the first 40 moves. And it's the move number 17 where Alireza have given a piece sacrifice. And Alireza is having 1 hour 50 minutes on the clock. So he basically used 10 minutes till the 17th move. And Hikaru is already perhaps down to he's actually very low on time. So we can conclude that this was all his preparation of Alireza Firouzja. Hikaru must have been completely scared. I can just guarantee it. Bishop g5, white has given a piece sacrifice. White is preparing to play e5, hitting the knight. Black continues the game with knight c6, and it took very much time for Hikaru to find the couple of next moves. If you try to play something else like knight at the place of knight c6, what are you going to play even? If you try to capture this pawn, I am having e5, hitting your knight, it's over. If you try to capture this pawn with the rook, I'm still having e5. What are you even going to do? That's a big question for Nakamura. He played knight c6, and here Alireza played queen c1. If white would have played e5, then black is having this move knight to d4, hitting the queen. The queen moved, and queen b7, a very nice save by Hikaru Nakamura. And if you try to capture the knight now, I'm having this queen into g2, and black is having this knight f3 ideas with giving a check. And now black is the one who is creating counterplay and is going to be better way soon. If you try to capture this rook, I'm having rook d8, and on the next move I'm having these checks, and black is the one who's going to put pressure on the white king. So queen c1, white is preparing to play queen f4, hitting this knight now. And if you try to play something like king g7, I'm already having e5 on the next move coming up. So here we have rook into d4 by black. e5 would have also been a fine move, completely chopping this. And bishop h4 is the best now. The idea is to give a check, which is a very deadly move. And okay, rook to d6 is the best continuation. Queen g5 checking h7, and white can repeat the position and it's draw. It's the best. But we have rook d4 by Nakamura. Rook g8, knight d4. Queen f4, knight to c2 check. If you try to play something like this, I'm already having moves like bishop h6 check. Can white go for pushing this pawn? It looks like perhaps, but it cannot be played because of knight to d5, hitting this queen. And now it's actually equal. Queen g4, we have queen b7, and guess what? Black is somehow surviving in this position. It looks like it's going to be a mate, but it's not. After bishop e7 check, taking away the dark squares, king h8, white can in the worst scenario white can actually, it's the best scenario for white to make a draw, and we have the result. But we have knight to c2 check by Nakamura, and what he calculated was king d1, queen check, and he somehow survives this spin. Somehow. If he tries to play king e2, black can simply keep giving checks like this. And after king d1, we have this king g7. If you try to push, I'm having knight d5, hitting a queen, and you see we have the same position where white can make a draw. But still very hard for black to continue in the position. King d1, Nakamura gave up the piece to get this check and get this check. If you would have played b3, we still have this position. If you would have played something like king c1, so that now black cannot capture this pawn with a check. But now black is simply having this queen c4 check, and white loses the rook. And actually, you can't go into the d file because of this rook d8 check. So it's kind of forced for white to go for playing king b1, and we have the trade of the queens. And after bishop f4, I can guarantee after till the move number 25. It's the move number 25, and from here, Alireza Firuza is starting to think, because till here, this was all this preparation, and Nakamura is like, whoosh! Finally, first of all, the only person who can win this position is white, because white is having the two pawns on the queen side against 3, which is holdable. But white is having 3 pawns on the king side against 1 actually. Because if this e pawn would have been on g6, I would have said that yeah, definitely it can draw. But as the pawn is on e6, white is having the opportunity to win the game. So knight f6, h4, we have a couple of moves where white starts to make the progress from the... he starts to push the pawns on the king side. We take, push, rook g8, check, king comes, h6. You can't capture because of h7 and everything is covered. Your rook can't capture, can't come in either of the square to stop the queen. So we have rook f8 and we have the trade of rooks. If Alireza would have kept the rook, I think he must have saw this after king f7, king g6. Perhaps there could be some chances for black to create some counterplay. That was the reason he decided to trade the rooks and go into a forcing creation of hitting this pawn, pushing the pawn. White wants to push the pawn, so the forced move for black is to play king f7, pushing the pawn, king move, pushing the pawn. And guess what? You can't move the knight because of bishop c6, bishop f6 check. You have to capture, and I can make a queen. You can't capture the pawn, it's a queen. And a single thing that white needs to do is, white just need to give a diagonal, this dark square check, and it's all over. White can bring the king. It's still winning. So it looks like everything is winning for white, and it looks like a zigzag. It's completely over. We have c3 by Nakamura. You have to capture, knight c3 check, king move, knight to d5. And guess what? It's a draw. It's a draw. So this position is not winning for white. We have bishop g5, pawn push, and now it's never going to be a diagonal check like this. And if you try to move this bishop from this diagonal, I can go for playing knight to e7. And now there is no bishop f6 check. I can capture this pawn and it's an equal position. So you have to keep the bishop like this. King d2, king move. And guess what? You can't actually come up with the king. If you try to play king g3, I'm having knight f4 check. I can capture the pawn on the next move. You can't capture this knight because now it's black who is winning. If you try to come, I can play b4. Takes, push, and black is the one who's making the queen first. You can't actually really come up with the king like here. If you try to come still here, I'm still having this knight f4. King d2, king h8, king e1, pawn push, takes, pawn push, bishop comes, takes. You can't take because of this. It's still a draw, but we have this king takes, takes. We have a draw. Very exciting game. Very exciting game. Whenever we see a draw, it is like a very boring game. But this game was actually very spicy and very complicated, which actually made every chess fan fall in the game of chess. First of all, there are 2 interesting players in the tournament. Actually, every player is interesting, but there are 2 main players whom the audience are looking out for: Alireza Firuza and Hikaru Nakamura. And such a unbelievable game. This game was actually, I would say that Hikaru Nakamura just survived against Alireza Firuza's dangerous preparation. And what I can say, a very interesting game, and I think the video length is just it's just going very high. So I'm going to stop the video like here. So if you like if you like this recap of the round number 3, then make sure to like the video, share this video with everyone, and make sure to subscribe to the channel if you're new to my channel. And I'm going to come up with the round 4 recap. So till then, stay tuned and keep watching OneShot Chess.